Hello, my name is Rachel, and I'm 38 years old. Lately, my life has been really difficult. The past few months have taught me to relearn so many things, especially about trust and resilience. My husband, Paul, was the root cause of much of my struggles. However, in the midst of it all, a kind person stepped in and helped me avoid further pain. Let me start by telling you a bit about the people in my life, the ones who have played important roles in my story. First, there's my younger sister, Joyce. She's 5 years younger than me, and she's always been the pretty one. Growing up, we didn't get along very well. I was the nerd, while she was the popular one. For some reason, she seemed to always pick on me. It felt like she was jealous, but I couldn't understand why. My mom tried to help us get along, but no matter what she did, it didn't really work. When I went off to college, we stopped talking much. It wasn't that we were angry or anything, but we just drifted apart. After I graduated and she became a teenager, we started talking a little more, but it wasn't like we were ever close. Our relationship got better in a way, but we never really bonded like sisters usually do. I accepted that this was the best we could have, and I was okay with that. Next is Paul, my ex-husband. Paul and I met at work, and we hit it off right away. He was charming and sweet, and we dated for about 4 years before we got married. After our wedding, we worked really hard and managed to buy our first home together. I was the one earning more at the time, so the mortgage and the deed were in my name. Everything seemed perfect. 3 years into our marriage, Paul brought up the topic of children. "Honey, there's something I've been thinking about," he said to me one night. "I need you to hear me out and keep an open mind, okay?" "Sure," I replied. "What is it?" "Well," he continued, "we've been together for a while now, and I was wondering if maybe we should start thinking about having a family. What do you think?" I hesitated. Paul knew how I felt about having kids, and I wasn't too sure about it. "Paul, you know I'm not really into that idea," I told him gently. "I know," he said, "but we have the financial stability now. It wouldn't be that hard, and imagine how cute little versions of us would be running around the house. Don't you think?" I smiled at the thought, but remained cautious. "Yeah, but kids are a lot of work. They're a huge responsibility. We're 3 of the most hardworking and responsible people we know, aren't we?" he teased, trying to win me over. "Just think about it, okay?" "I promise I'll help with everything." Despite my doubts, I eventually gave in. Paul kept bringing it up, and over time, I started to warm up to the idea. Soon enough, we welcomed our first child, a son. 4 years later, we had a daughter. At first, Paul was very supportive. He helped out with the kids, and I thought everything was going well. But things changed quickly. Paul slowly stopped helping around the house. All the responsibilities fell on me, taking care of the children, the house, and everything in between. I found myself doing it all. After our son was born, Paul got a promotion and started earning more than me. One day, he came to me and suggested that I should stop working. "I'm making enough now," he told me. "Why don't you focus on the kids and the house? You don't need to work anymore." I tried to resist at first, knowing how important my career was to me. But Paul was persistent. He kept saying it made sense for our family, and eventually, I gave in to his wishes once again. I quit my job, thinking it would make things easier for everyone, but I had no idea how much worse things were going to get. I decided it wasn't worth the argument anymore, so I accepted my new role as a stay-at-home mom. To keep myself from getting bored, I picked up a new hobby, hosting dinner parties. It gave me something to look forward to, and it was nice to have my family around. I often invited my mom and my sister, who both lived nearby, and whenever my mother-in-law, Cheryl, was in town, she would join us as well. At first, this new life felt strange, but over time, I started to get comfortable with it. I had more time to spend with my kids, and I got to see my family often, which brought me some happiness. Paul and I were doing okay, at least I thought so. However, there had been some strain in our relationship. After giving birth to our second child, I went through a traumatic experience where I almost lost my life. It was a terrifying time for me, and it definitely affected our marriage. But I tried to push past it, telling myself everything would be fine eventually. I didn't think anything else was seriously wrong between us. But how wrong I was. One afternoon, I was cleaning our bedroom when I stumbled upon something that stopped me in my tracks, a pair of panties that didn't belong to me. They were lying in a corner, and my heart sank the moment I saw them. My mind started racing. How could this be? Were they someone else's? Was I not enough for Paul? I had been feeling distant from him lately, but I had just had a baby. It hadn't even been a full year since I gave birth, and I was still recovering, both physically and emotionally. I had been going to therapy to help deal with my postpartum trauma, making slow progress. But it seemed like it wasn't enough because now I was faced with the reality that my husband might be cheating on me. Once the initial shock wore off, anger took over. I couldn't believe this was happening.
I had to know who he was cheating with and why.
My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and sent Paul a picture of the underwear. I texted him, asking, "Whose are these?" But I didn't stop there. I needed more answers, so I opened his laptop and logged into his social media accounts. I wasn't proud of it, but I was desperate. I scrolled through his chats, hoping to find something, but at first, there was nothing suspicious. No unfamiliar women, no secret conversations that stood out. This only confused me more. I went through every contact, every message, trying to find some sort of clue. As I scrolled, I noticed that my sister's name popped up in a lot of the conversations. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, why would I be suspicious of my sister talking to my husband? But something in me pushed to check their chat history anyway. What I found made me feel sick to my stomach. Their chats were filled with pictures and videos of them in bed together. There were messages where they talked about how much they loved each other, and even plans for Paul to leave me. I was horrified. My own sister, the one I had known my entire life, had been sleeping with my husband behind my back. I couldn't believe it. I felt betrayed on a level I didn't even think was possible. My relationship with my sister had always been complicated, but I never imagined she would do something like this. First, I ran to the bathroom and threw up because the disgust was overwhelming. Then, I tried calling Paul, but he didn't pick up. My mind was racing with so many questions and I needed answers, so I did the only thing I could think of. I called my sister, Joyce. She answered casually, like nothing was wrong.
"Hey, what's up?" she said.
I could hardly contain my anger. "Don't, what's up me? Seriously, what is wrong with you?" Joyce sounded confused, like she didn't know what I was talking about.
"What do you mean?" she asked.
"I found a pair of your panties in my bedroom." I snapped. "Have you been sleeping with Paul's?" There was a brief pause before she answered, her voice almost indifferent. "Yeah, for a while now." My chest tightened with rage.
"Why?"
I demanded. "Why would you do this to me?" Joyce sighed, like she was annoyed by my reaction. "I don't know, Rachel. It just happened. You seriously thought it was okay to sleep with my husband?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You're my sister. How could you do this to me?" "I thought I was helping you out," she said, like it was no big deal. Helping me out? By sleeping with my husband. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Joyce had always been self-centered, but this was beyond anything I ever thought she was capable of. Joyce's casual tone made it even worse. "Look, Rachel, you've been boring lately. I figure I'd step in since you clearly weren't making Paul happy." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe that she was trying to justify her betrayal as if she was doing me a favor. At that moment, I realized that I had been blind to the toxicity in both my marriage and my relationship with my sister. The people closest to me had torn my life apart, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You kept Paul busy so I could focus on the kids? Are you serious?" I shouted into the phone. "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." Joyce sighed on the other end, her voice flat. "Look, we didn't mean for it to go this far, okay? I only did it because he kept hitting on me, and he's a nice guy." I felt my heart drop even further. "But he's my husband, Joyce. Why would you help tear our family apart like this?" She didn't seem to care. "I just want what's best for Paul. If I'm what's best for him, then so be it." I was stunned. "You're disgusting," I spat before hanging up. I couldn't believe her nerve. My own sister, who was supposed to have my back, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I lay in bed, completely numb, tears streaming down my face. I never thought my life would come to this. Everything felt shattered. Eventually, my youngest child woke up crying, pulling me out of my daze. I wiped my tears and tended to her, trying to push the pain aside. I couldn't let my kids see that something was wrong. They didn't need to carry this burden. As I went through the motions of the day, picking up my oldest from school, making dinner, and trying to smile when they asked where their dad was, I lied and told them he was working late. Inside, I was falling apart. As the hours passed, my anger turned into worry. It was almost 10 p.m., and Paul still hadn't come home. I tried calling him multiple times, but he didn't answer. I even tried calling Joyce to see if he was with her, but she didn't pick up either. Exhausted and emotionally drained, I finally went to bed, hoping that maybe, just maybe, I'd wake up and find that this had all been a terrible nightmare. But when I woke up the next morning, the feeling of dread only deepened. Something was wrong, and I could feel it. I looked around the bedroom and noticed that Paul's things were missing. I rushed to check the cupboards, the drawers, and anywhere he might have kept his stuff.
Most of it was gone.
He had left while I was asleep, without a word, without a note, without a goodbye. I stood there, in disbelief. Paul had just left. He didn't even try to talk things through or explain himself. He had simply packed up and walked out of our lives. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, but the only thing I could think about was my children. They needed me, and that had to come first. So, I did what any mom would do. I pushed down the pain, got my kids ready for the day, dropped my oldest off at school, and then drove to my mom's house with my youngest. When I got there, my mom could tell something was wrong. I was distant, barely speaking, my mind trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. I hadn't even had the courage to tell her about Paul and Joyce yet. All I could think about was how I was going to raise 3 kids on my own. The weight of it all was too much. Finally, my mom couldn't take my silence anymore. She looked at me, concerned. "Okay, enough," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "What's going on? Something's clearly bothering you." I hesitated. How could I even begin to explain? "I don't know how to say this," I started, my voice trembling. "Just start from the beginning," she urged. "What happened?" I took a deep breath and blurted it out. "I found out Paul has been cheating on me." My mom's face fell in shock.
What?
"How do you know?" "I found another woman's underwear in our bedroom. When I asked Paul about it, he didn't answer, and then he left." Her eyes widened. "He left? What do you mean he left?" "When I woke up this morning, all his things were gone. He packed up and left during the night. I didn't even realize when he came back." My mom shook her head in disbelief. "Oh my God, my poor girl. I'm so sorry this happened." I could feel the tears welling up again. "Yeah," I whispered. "It gets worse." My mom's expression changed to one of deep concern. "Oh no, what happened? Do you know who he cheated on you with?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know who it was. I went through his things, and I found out." Mom looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "Who was it?" I could barely get the words out. "It was Joyce." There was a long, heavy silence. My mom's face went pale as she stared at me in disbelief. "Excuse me? What did you just say?" "My own sister," I repeated, the pain and betrayal washing over me again. "Paul has been cheating on me with my own sister." My mom's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Neither of us could believe the nightmare we were living. I called Joyce to confront her about everything, and to my shock, she was completely casual about it. She told me they were in love and that she believed she was the best thing for Paul, so she planned to stay with him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own sister had betrayed me, and she didn't even seem to care. "Oh my God," I whispered. "What has she done? How am I going to survive this?" I felt completely lost. I had 3 kids to raise, no job, and now no husband. "Look," my mom said gently, "why don't we just get some rest for now? We'll figure this out together. I'm here to help you, okay?" I nodded, feeling grateful for her support.
Yeah, okay.
"Thanks, Mom." By the time I had finished telling my mom everything, I felt numb. It was strange, but somehow, talking about it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. Maybe I had already started to shut down emotionally. That night, I slept while my mom took care of my youngest. I felt drained, like my body couldn't handle any more. When I woke up, I heard my baby crying and my mom's voice, loud and angry. I rushed out of bed and saw her on the phone, looking furious. She hung up as soon as she saw me, and her expression softened. "I'm sorry for the noise," she said, "but don't worry about it." I didn't need her to explain. I knew she had been giving Joyce a piece of her mind. Over the next few days, my mom stayed with us, and it helped to have someone by my side. Joyce kept trying to call our mom, but she asked me to block Joyce's number. It was comforting to have someone understand my feelings, especially when I felt so alone. Soon, I found out from mutual friends that Paul and Joyce had gotten married. They reached out to me, confused and concerned, and I had to explain the whole awful situation. It was humiliating, but they were supportive. Many of them blocked Paul and Joyce, refusing to associate with them anymore. I couldn't believe they had gotten married the day after Paul left me. It hurt deeply, but I realized I shouldn't have expected anything different from them. When I told my mom, she was furious. My mom is usually calm and composed, so seeing her so angry was surprising. Still, her support meant everything to me. She didn't have to help me financially, but she did. She even assisted me in getting job interviews, knowing how much I wanted to contribute now that Paul was out of the picture. Taking care of the kids was manageable, but every time they asked about their dad, I had to fight back the tears. Even though it was tough, we were getting through it. About a week later, I received a letter from Paul. I didn't want anything to do with it. In my mind, a week was far too long for him to try and make things right, especially after abandoning his family. I figured it was some kind of apology, but I didn't care anymore. I was done. Without thinking twice, I burned the letter. Afterward, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of curiosity about what it said. Sometimes I wondered if I should have read it before destroying it, but then I reminded myself that nothing Paul could say would change how I felt about him or what he had done to me and our kids. The next day, my mom and I decided to take the kids to the local fair. It was a much-needed distraction, and we had a blast. It felt so good to laugh and enjoy myself after everything that had happened. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to have fun. That night, after we got the kids to bed, my mom and I relaxed with a bottle of wine. I opened up to her about the letter. "So, something came in the mail for me yesterday," I said, swirling my wine glass. "Oh? What was it?" my mom asked. "A letter from Paul," I replied.
My mom looked at me in surprise. "What?"
"What did it say?" "I don't know," I admitted. She furrowed her brow. "What do you mean? You didn't open it?" "No, I didn't want to deal with anything he had to say," I said. "So, I burned it." "You burned it?" My mom's eyes widened in shock. "Cow. What if they were divorce papers or something important?" I shook my head. The envelope didn't look official or legal.
"I'm sure it wasn't that." My mom sighed.
"Well, if you're sure, but what do you think was in it?" I thought for a moment, but I honestly had no idea. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was nothing. But whatever it was, I knew it couldn't change the way I felt about Paul or what he had done to me and our family. I was moving forward, with or without answers. "I don't know," I said, thinking about the letter I burned. Maybe it was a weak apology or a request for his stuff back. I wouldn't be surprised if that's all it was. My mom looked at me with concern. "How are you feeling about all of this now?" I sighed. Today was actually a good day. But it's tough, especially when the kids keep asking where their dad is. What do I even tell them? It's slowly getting better, but only a little. As long as it's improving, even just a little, my mom said reassuringly. "And you know I'm always here for you. I want you to know something. I'm cutting ties with your sister. Everything I have, it'll go to you and the kids." I was touched by her words. "Mom, that means so much to me, but are you sure? Evelyn is still your daughter, too." She nodded firmly. "I know you and Joyce had your differences growing up, but what she did is unforgivable. I raised both of you better than this, and clearly, Joyce didn't care. She's no longer my daughter after what she's done." I was speechless. A part of me understood my mom's decision, but I also knew how painful it must have been for her to make. I could never imagine cutting off one of my own children, no matter what they did. But hearing her say it made me even more grateful for her unwavering support. I knew it couldn't have been easy for her, and yet, she stood by me. Another 5 days passed quietly, and one afternoon, there was a knock on the door. It was strange because I wasn't expecting anyone. Besides my mom, who was at work, no one ever visited me anymore. Feeling a bit uneasy, I opened the door cautiously and saw 3 men dressed in black suits standing there. I opened the door just a crack and asked, "Who are you?" They introduced themselves as lawyers and told me they had something for me. One of the men handed me a letter and then a check. When I looked at the check, my jaw dropped. It was made out to me for $980,000. There must be some mistake, I stammered, completely stunned by the amount. There's no mistake, one of the men said gently. Please read the letter. With shaky hands, I opened the letter. As I read the first line, "Thank you for saving me," I realized the money was from my mother-in-law, Cheryl. She explained in the letter that she had tried visiting us 5 days ago, but found no one at home. When she called Paul, he made excuses about not being able to get into the house. Cheryl became suspicious and pressed him for the truth. Eventually, Paul confessed everything about the affair, about leaving us. Cheryl was disgusted by his behavior. She wrote that she was deeply sorry for everything I had gone through and was grateful that I had not trusted her son with her assets. That's why she had decided to leave all her inheritance to me and her grandchildren. The check I held was part of that inheritance. Tears filled my eyes as I continued reading. The lawyers then explained that Cheryl had been terminally ill and she had passed away just the day before. She had instructed them to make sure I received the money immediately after her death, so I could take care of myself and the kids. Her letter ended with a heartfelt thank you for preventing her from making a mistake in trusting Paul with her finances. I was overwhelmed by Cheryl's kindness. Despite everything, she had always been a woman of integrity, someone who stood up for what was right, even when it meant going against her own son. Paul had always been intimidated by her strength and independence, but I had admired her for those very qualities. As the reality of her passing sunk in, I couldn't help but cry. Cheryl had been remarkable, and even in her final days, she had thought about me and my kids. She had wanted to protect us, and in doing so, she left behind a legacy of generosity and care. It was hard to believe that someone who had no obligation to me anymore would go to such lengths to ensure we were okay. I wiped away my tears and thanked the lawyers for delivering the letter and check. They expressed their condolences and left quietly. As I stood there holding the check, I couldn't help but feel both sadness and gratitude. Cheryl's last act of kindness had given me a lifeline, something to hold on to as I rebuilt my life without Paul. Later that night, I sat with my mom and told her everything. "Mom," I said softly, "you won't believe this, but Cheryl left me and the kids her entire inheritance." My mom looked at me in surprise.
What?
Why would she do that? She knew what Paul did, I explained. She was disgusted by him, and she didn't want him to have anything. So, she gave it all to us. My mom sat back, shaking her head in disbelief. Cheryl was a strong woman. It doesn't surprise me that she'd do the right thing in the end. You and the kids deserve this after everything you've been through. I smiled through my tears. She was one of the good ones. I just wish I could have thanked her in person. She knew, my mom said softly, in her own way, she knew how much it would mean to you. We spent the rest of the evening reminiscing about Cheryl and how she had always had a quiet strength that people underestimated. Despite the pain and loss, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that I had people like Cheryl and my mom who truly cared about me and my kids. I found comfort in her. She kept her promise and supported me until the very end. A few days later, Paul called. I already knew what he was going to say, but I decided to listen. "What did you do?" he asked. "What do you mean?" I replied. "You know exactly what I mean, Paul. Be more clear."
What are you talking about?
"Why weren't you home that day? I specifically asked you to be there. I sent you a letter asking you to act like everything was normal while my mom visited." "Oh, was that what the letter said?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "You didn't read it?" "No, I burned it. You betrayed me. My mom was going to help me with the inheritance, but you took it all because you're selfish." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's funny, coming from you. You abandoned your family, and only reached out to me when it was about the inheritance. Love can't be forced, Paul. I did what was best for me, and your mother did what was best for us. Don't ever try to contact me or the kids again.
Goodbye.
After that, things happened quickly. I filed for divorce and was granted full custody of the kids. Paul tried to fight for the inheritance, but Cheryl had made it clear that it was for me, so he didn't win. He and Joyce tried to pressure me into giving them some of the money, but I refused to budge. Life has become easier since I got the money. I set aside a portion for my kids' college and invested the rest. My mom was able to retire, and I started working again. The kids have accepted that their dad isn't coming back, and when they're older, I'll tell them everything. I'm still healing, but I know things will only get better from here.